button now?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it looks like we're live.
Cool.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Jeff Robertson. I'm the Executive Director for the PKD Foundation of Canada. Very thankful to have a extremely large group with us today. We have some 530 people signed up for today, so that's absolutely marvelous. We're going to give you guys a bit of time to get into the room now. There's some housekeeping items that we'll touch on. And then, of course, I have the utmost privilege to throw to Dr. Strubl. So this is the fourth educational webinar of our series this year. I encourage you guys to stay tuned on social media as part of our newsletter and our website in the coming days when we will announce our next topic, as well as some information on a very special 3-day online symposium that we're starting to gear up for. So check us out. npkd.ca is the website that I'll plug a couple times over the course of this event, but not too many. As a courtesy to you guys, we will be emailing you in the coming days after the webinar is up online. So don't feel that you have to take extensive notes this evening. We will have this available to watch at your leisure on our website in the next week or so. One reminder, there is a question box as well as a comment box for you guys to engage in throughout the event, and I'll be watching that and monitoring that during the presentation. We just ask any questions that you have, if you fear that you will forget it, saving it until the end, you can of course type it in the box. We will be answering questions. Dr. Strubl will be answering questions at the end of his main presentation, which should be in and around the 1 hour mark. And then we'll go through questions that were emailed in, as well as sent through on social media, and of course those in the question box below. This webinar that we're hosting this evening is of course on the experience of people with ADPKD with ketogenic diets, the feasibility and effects. Recently, the Weimbs laboratory has published the first evidence that induction of ketosis via a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting ameliorates disease progression in animal models of PKD. Due to their common use for weight control or for other health benefits, ADPKD patients may have already have experience with the ketogenic dietary interventions. This case series study was designed to gain first insights about possible effects and the feasibility of ketogenic diets for ADPKD patients. A bit about our speaker, Dr. Sebastian Strubl, MD. Dr. Strubl is a physician scientist from Germany. He graduated as MD at the University of Cologne, Germany in 2017, where he gained clinical experience as resident physician from June 28 to Jan 29. He received his doctoral degree from the Department of Biochemistry of the University Gießen, Germany in 2019. Dr. Strubl is currently doing research as postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, Santa Barbara. As part of Professor Weimbs' laboratory, he is investigating the impact of crystal deposition on underlying signaling mechanisms of ADPKD, and is furthermore leading a retrospective clinical trial about ketogenic dietary interventions in this disease. A very busy man that we're thrilled to have join us from Santa Barbara. Thank you, Dr. Strubl, for taking the afternoon on your side to join us. So I'll throw over to you.
Thank you very much. Right. Right, you can see the presentation. All right, then I start. At first, I want to thank, of course, the PKD Foundation of Canada, especially Mr. Robertson, for inviting me to this webinar. As you already mentioned, I'm presenting my case series study, Experience of People with ADPKD with Ketogenic Diets, Feasibility and Effects. Conflict of interest, I declare no conflict of interest. My PI, Thomas Weimbs, declares following conflict of interest. He's an inventor on pending patents related to PKD and a shareholder and president of Santa Barbara Nutrients. Before I start, if you're interested to get more news about our lab, I highly recommend visiting our webpage here, the Weimbs Laboratory page. And from here, you also can access our Facebook page, our Facebook group. I highly recommend to join this group as well if you want to stay up to date about the news from our lab and the recent publications. If you want to download our publications, you can do so via our homepage here on publications. You can access and download for free all the publications. All right, before I'm gonna come to all my results, I want to give a little introduction here, starting with ketosis and ketogenic diets. The state of ketosis is defined by elevated levels of acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, in short term BHB, and acetone, the three ketone bodies in our body. Baseline levels are normally below 0.3 millimolar. And when you induce ketosis now, physiological levels are lying then around 0.5 to 7 millimolar. As you probably know, ketosis can be achieved by different dietary interventions like fasting, ketogenic diets, or caloric restriction. When you induce ketosis by caloric restriction, you mostly aim for a calorie restriction by around 20 to 50%. In terms of fasting, the most common model is time-restricted diet, especially the 16-8 model here, where you fast for 16 hours and you can eat in a time window of 8 hours. There are different models, for example, interval models, alternate day fasting, where you can fast, for example, for 2 or 3 consecutive days or in certain intervals. In terms of ketogenic diet, if you take a look down here, here you see the average US diet, which is mainly based on lots of carbohydrates. Ketogenic diets, however, are characterized by a high amount of fat intake and quite a limitation in carbs, and most of the time a moderate protein intake. And as you also can see, ketogenic diets have actually a wide or a broad range, from a very strict one like the classical ketogenic diet, and on the other side you find the modified Atkins diet with less fat and especially more protein. And all those diets in this range can induce ketosis, of course, to different extent, and the extent of ketosis is also dependent on the individual as well. All right, but what is happening in our body when entering ketosis? So let's pretend first we're taking in a diet as usual, which is rich in carbohydrates. So we're taking those in, and those get broken down in our intestines to simple sugars like glucose. This glucose gets into our blood, is transported to all the organs, and the organs can actually use it as energy, as fuel. Most of the time we're taking too much glucose, too much carbs to us, and then the body, of course, wants to store it for bad times. And the body is doing so first by shifting everything into the short-term storage called glycogen in the liver. And when this one is full, it starts storing all that stuff, all the energy in the adipose tissue, which is basically the body fat. Let's pretend now that we are starting fasting or a ketogenic diet. So what is happening? We are taking away carbs and so glucose. So the body needs to adapt now to preserve all the organs' function. And the body is doing so by first using the short-term storage called glycogen, releasing glucose. And in this period, the organs can preserve their functions. And the body is using this time to actually switch over to get energy out of the adipose tissue. This switch can take something between 2 to 7 days. And then fatty acids are released out of the adipose tissue. And several or most organs actually can directly use those fatty acids in the blood to utilize as fuel by a process called beta oxidation. I just want to notice some cells, for example, red blood cells, cannot use fatty acids because they don't have mitochondria. And another exception is the brain, because fatty acids cannot pass the blood-brain barrier there. But fortunately for those organs or cells, the fatty acids also come to the liver. The liver is also doing processes like beta oxidation and uses some intermediate products to actually produce some glucose for red blood cells, for example, and also ketone bodies. And the liver releases those ketone bodies into the blood, and then the organs can, or most organs can again use it as energy fuel, as fuel. But I also want to notice that ketones have signaling activity. So it can induce signaling mechanisms in different organs. And this whole, this whole mechanism here, this whole switch in metabolism is tightly regulated by several hormones. The most important ones are insulin and glucagon. And here I want to highlight that it's very important not to confuse it with the pathological state of ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis always require actually a pathological dysregulation of this whole system. As you can find it, for example, in diabetes mellitus type 1, where you have a complete lack of insulin, right? And what's happening then is that the production of ketone bodies can overdrive and reach actually levels around or higher than 10 millimolar. And this consecutively leads to metabolic acidosis, and this can be a dangerous state. But however, in a normal, healthy human, this is a complete physiological mechanism to enter ketosis here, which is very well regulated. But as you probably can imagine, in such a complex metabolism, there are also contraindications and side effects that can occur. Contraindications, for example, are some rare disorders of fat metabolism. Imagine those people cannot use fatty acids as energy. So those people should definitely not start fasting or start a ketogenic diet. That's important. In terms of side effects, one well-known side effect are the increased risk of kidney stones, which is also important, of course, in terms of ADPKD, because that's a thing we definitely want to avoid, actually. There was actually a very nice poster presentation on this year's ASN, the biggest kidney conference in the world, which took place last week. And they did a meta-analysis on that and could show that the risk for kidney stones in adults doing a ketogenic diet is lying around 9%. And the second side effect I want to highlight is probably the most well-known one, and also often considered as a safety concern in those diets, and that's hyperlipidemia. So hyperlipidemia basically means high fats, high cholesterol, high LDL, and we all know high LDL is correlated with an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. I will talk about this later on more when I show you some results connected to that. But to sum this up, I think it's very important to highlight that you always should consult your doctor before changing your diet, supplements, as you would do with your medication. In terms of our next important point, ketogenic diets seem to be beneficial for several diseases. They are already in clinical use, for example, for weight control and obesity, and since decades already in clinical use for certain types of pediatric epilepsy. The recent years actually showed that ketogenic diets might also be beneficial for several other diseases like diabetes or certain types of cancer or Alzheimer's. And fortunately, since last year, thanks to Jacob Torres and Thomas Weimbs, we also can put now ADPKD to this list. And that's what I want to talk about next on the next slides, about PKD and ketosis. As we all know, ADPKD is a genetic disease caused by mutations in two genes, PKD1, PKD2. It's leading to slow progressive cyst growth, resulting in loss of kidney function, and ultimately requires dialysis or kidney transplant in most cases. So what is happening in those cysts? Those cysts are made out of so-called cyst lining cells, and those cells are aberrantly proliferating and aberrantly secreting cyst fluid. And in the last decade, several signaling pathways were identified that were aberrantly activated in those cells. In the last decades, also many drugs were tried to target those signaling pathways. Actually, they also entered several clinical trials, unfortunately, mostly with poor outcome, mostly due to strong side effects in those, due to those drugs there. But recent years also have shown that some of those signaling pathways are very well associated to cell metabolism, to the energy state of those cells, for example, like the mTOR mechanism. And based on this, it was also proposed in the last years that those cells, those cyst lining cells, seem to be metabolically inflexible, requiring glucose as energy source, quite similar to actually to cancer cells. And that's basically where this whole story in our lab started, with a former lab member, Kevin Kipp, who used this metabolic approach to alter one of those signaling pathways, the mTOR pathway. So what he did was he used a mouse model of PKD and put them on a caloric restriction by reducing their food intake by around 23%. And the results you can see down here. Here you got a reference kidney from a healthy mouse. That's the cystic kidney of this PKD model. And when you put this model on the caloric restriction, you see a significant inhibition in renal cyst growth. And this, of course, raised the question: is that just due to the caloric restriction, or are there maybe different factors mediating those results? And the very interesting finding Kevin Kipp made is actually in the method he used. So he gave those animals pre-weighed food once a day, and those animals consumed all the food within 1 hour, basically putting themselves on a time-restricted diet, raising the questions if maybe the time-restricted diet has any influence. And that was basically then addressed by another research scientist in our lab, a very great research scientist, Jacob Torres, who actually could show in his recent publication that the state of ketosis seemed to mediate those effects. And that's what I want to show you in the next slides. This is Jacob. And what he basically did is he used this time a rat model of PKD, and in 2 sets of experiments, he treated those rats with a time-restricted diet or a ketogenic diet. And today I will show you some figures out of his paper in the ketogenic diet setting. And basically he could reproduce all those results from the previous publication. Here you see a cystic rat kidney of this model on a normal diet. If you put those rats of this model now on a ketogenic diet, you see again a significant inhibition in cyst growth. He also used older rats of this model who already developed cysts, put them on the diet, and here actually he could also show that the cyst burden was reversed. Furthermore, he could show down here, you can see that fibrosis was reduced. Here in a collagen staining, a marker for fibrosis in red, you see those cystic animals have lots of fibrosis going on. When you put them on a ketogenic diet, you see that all the red staining is almost gone or reduced. Last but not least, he also could show that this PKD-associated signaling mechanisms, mTOR in this figure and STAT3 in this figure, are also reduced up in ketogenic diet. So here you see again the cystic animals, and all the green staining is the activated mTOR pathway, in those images the activated phospho-STAT3 pathway. Putting them on a ketogenic diet basically showed a significant increase in this activity. So this time, that means actually that those settings had no caloric restriction, but both methods, both experiments actually induce ketosis, as Jacob could show. So that actually suggests that those results are mediated by the state of ketosis. And as I just explained, and to sum this up again, that means that the decreased glucose availability, the increased fatty acid supply, and the increased ketone body supply actually could contribute to those results. And from here, Jacob wanted to go one step further and hypothesized that maybe the ketone bodies itself could lead to those major results. And for this reason, he used the same model again, but this time he treated those with exogenous beta-hydroxybutyrate, short BHB. And the results you can see here again. So this is a kidney of a cystic rat again in this model. Treating them with BHB significantly reduced the kidney size and inhibited cyst growth. And this kidney is basically almost the same size as a normal rat healthy kidney. So he also found all the other findings from the experiments I showed you before. He found significant reduced fibrosis again, significant reduced proliferation of cyst lining cells, and also he could show that the kidney function was preserved in those experiments. So those experiments actually suggested that BHB seemed to be the major player of those effects. And at the moment, more research, of course, of Jacob is going on in our lab. And now he's, of course, trying to track down how is BHB actually doing this. Is BHB doing this as a metabolite, as a fuel, or is BHB doing this by the signaling molecule itself? And we are, of course, very interested and looking forward to hear, hopefully soon, more results from Jacob there. Yeah, but all those results, of course, let us wonder if there could be already not participants, but ADPKD patients out there who have experimented with such diets. Yeah, since ketogenic diets are widely accessible, already used for weight control, we thought maybe we find some ADPKD patients out there. And that's the reason why we designed this retrospective clinical case series study. And we seeked at the beginning maybe to find 10 ADPKD patients there who would share some insights. So we included, of course, people with ADPKD who experimented with ketogenic diet, time-restricted diet, or caloric restriction. We recruited via social media, via emailing list of the US PKD Foundation and the Weimbs lab. Data was collected by questionnaire-based phone interviews. The questions basically aim to get insights and data about the feasibility, effects, side effects, safety concerns of those diets. And we also tried to collect clinical data there. Today, I show you preliminary results, but those results are very close to the final data. Actually, we're just waiting on some more data from our collaboration side, from my home medical school in the University Hospital of Cologne there. So today, I'm showing you data from 117 participants in the study. They executed their diets in a median time on diet for 5 months. And as you can see, 66 executed a ketogenic diet, 48 did time-restricted diet, and 3 caloric restriction. I just want to highlight here, those guys on ketogenic diet often also did additionally time-restricted diet or caloric restriction, while those 2 groups were solely on this one diet. Right. Let's come to the results now. At first, we were, of course, interested in the diet execution. We wanted to know why actually did those ADPKD patients started those diets. So we asked them, why have you been on your diet? And 61% surprisingly reported due to ADPKD, while 31% reported due to weight loss. This information, together with the fact that the median time on diet is lying around 5 months, this actually suggests or shows that most of the participants started right around the time when Jacob Torres' paper came out. We also asked, how did you find out about your diet? And here I just want to highlight that over 50% of participants take their resources or their information out of the internet or social media, confirming actually the great work all the PKD patients are doing in their social media groups, sharing all their experiences. All right, for us, of course, it was very interesting to know how actually do the participants control their diet? How do they ensure that they are in ketosis, that they are doing their ketogenic diet right? In terms of the ketogenic diet cohort here, we analyzed that around 73% tracked their macronutrients like fats, carbs, or proteins. Around 53% measured their actual ketone levels in the breath, in the urine, in the blood. And around 11% did neither of those, which basically means they either followed a ketogenic recipe book or they did it by feeling. We were, of course, very interested in those measured ketone levels. So we asked those participants if they can provide average ketone body levels. And 31 participants reached back to us with those. And those are plotted here. And you can see those participants had a range of ketone levels between 0.5 millimolar to 4 millimolar with a median average around 1.5 millimolar. In terms of time-restricted diet, you can see that the most popular, most common used time-restricted diet model is the actual 16-8 model with 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating. All right, and then first of all, we were of course very interested if those participants in the study saw any impact on their overall health and well-being after starting their diet. And to begin with, most of the graphs that I'm showing you now have 3 columns, one for the total cohort, in green separated just the ketogenic diet cohort, and in red, the time-restricted diet cohort. Most of the time, I will concentrate on the total cohort unless there are significant differences between the separated one, as you can see in this graph. So it was very surprising to see that in total, over 80% reported their health and well-being strongly or somewhat improved. You can see that the ketogenic diet cohort reported definitely more strong improvements than the time-restricted diet here. So this data actually let us think, how did they get those improvements in health and well-being? Yeah, and here we were, of course, very interested in PKD-related health issues. We all know that PKD can affect daily life by several different PKD-associated health issues. So therefore, we ask our participants, have you had any recurrent health issue related to ADPKD before starting the diet? And here, 99 participants reported such recurrent health issues before starting their diet. So then we also asked our participants, have any old health issues changed after starting your diet? And here, most notably, in total, 70 participants of those 99 reported an improvement of those. Here again, you can see that the ketogenic diet cohort definitely reported more improvements than the time-restricted diet. However, still 26% did not see any changes, and 6 participants reported worsenings of some symptoms. With those 2 questions, we also asked our participants, or we also let them specify those health issues, and that's what I'm showing you in the next graph. What you can see here, all those columns in green are the reported health issues of our participants before starting the diet. In purple, you can see the reported health issues that have improved after starting the diet. And in red, the same, but just with the worsenings. I want to highlight here the 4 most frequent reported health issues before starting the diet were flank and back pain, fatigue, abdominal fullness, and acid reflux. And it's again very nice to see actually that here, for example, for flank and back pain, 50% of those reports also reported an improvement after the diet. Even higher, 67 and 68% of those reported health issues, fatigue and abdominal fullness, were reported to have improved. You also can see those few worsenings to abdominal fullness and to acid reflux, for example. So to sum this data up, I would definitely say the data highly suggests that ketogenic diets could be definitely beneficial for daily recurrent PKD-associated health issues. And probably that could be also the reason and could contribute to those major improvements in overall health and well-being. All right, beside that, we also wanted to get some data and some analysis or information about the physical impact of ketogenic diets. And here I start with some data on water consumption. Why did we look at water consumption? So we all know for PKD patients, it's highly recommended to have a water consumption of at least 3 liters per day, because this is beneficial for the disease progression. But it's also known that ketogenic diets, especially when starting those diets, can lead to dehydration. And this again can trigger side effects like, for example, the incidence of kidney stones, which we definitely want to avoid. For this reason, we asked our participants, did you experience any change in water consumption after starting your diet? And it was a little bit surprising to see that 50% reported no, while the other 50% reported yes, automatically, or because it is recommended. And especially here, based on those reports, I did, of course, some more analysis on that. And I plotted the self-reported water consumption of all those participants before starting the diet in green and after starting the diet in purple. And on the left side, you find all the participants who saw changes. And here you can see a significant increase in water consumption by around 1.5 liter. On the other side, you see all the participants who didn't experience any changes. And I think here you can see clearly the reason why they didn't see any changes, because they had a significant higher intake of water before starting the diet than those who saw changes, around 3.3 liters. And I think what you definitely should take out of this slide is, when you think about starting such diets, for example, I think you definitely should be aware to hit this mark around 3 liters, because that's on one hand recommended for PKD, but this is also the mark, the 3 liter mark that is recommended when you start a ketogenic diet to drink per day. Right. Of course, another big topic or important topic is weight. We all know ketogenic diets are known to be able to reduce weight very significantly, but weight plays also an important role for PKD. It is known that increase in weight and obesity can trigger disease progression. And also nowadays, the weight tends to increase in PKD patients, as it also does in the whole population, actually. So we asked our participants, did you experience any weight loss after starting your diet? And as expected, 91% reported yes. So we analyzed all the data on the weight from before starting the diet in green again and after starting the diet. And here you can see a very significant weight reduction by a mean average of 8.7 kilograms in the total cohort. In the separated analysis, you see that the ketogenic diet cohort had slightly higher weight loss than the time-restricted diet cohort. We also asked, are you still experiencing weight loss? Here, 63% reported it leveled off after some time. Most of the participants reported a very fast weight loss within weeks to the first month. Then it slowed down in the next month, and then it leveled off in 3 to 5 months. However, 37% reported it is still continuing. So I did some sub-analysis between those two cohorts, looking for the time on diet and the starting weight. But I couldn't find any significant differences between those groups, actually, because I at first expected maybe those participants here started on a higher weight or are on the diet for a shorter time. But there was no difference. And I think that this might lie in the individual dietary protocol, probably. But however, this raised some concerns that maybe participants could actually reach some levels of underweight, which could be a safety concern and it could be dangerous. And for this reason, I analyzed the BMI of our participants before starting the diet and after starting the diet. And fortunately, at first, you can see here no blue points, which are for the classification of underweight. So that means no of the participants hit underweight, which is actually a very positive result here. And for me, this also suggests that, all right, in the short term of 5 months, ketogenic diets could be feasible and also relatively safe for weight loss in PKD people. Another nice thing you can see, those red dots for the obese classification are reducing after starting the diet, and those green spots for the normal weight are increasing after starting the diet, with a mean average BMI reduction around 2.7 points. To sum up this data, I think the data definitely suggests that ketogenic diet could be a very effective way for weight loss in PKD people. And I also want to mention here, I saw a very nice poster at this year's ASN, a meta-analysis on the HALT study about blood pressure. And there they found actually that obesity and increase in weight is associated with greater daily symptoms. And they could show that a decrease in weight actually decreases the odds that those symptoms are worsening. And I thought that those results are very well matching my data here, showing that ketogenic diets could actually be effective for weight loss and probably contribute on this way to those significant improvements the participants saw in daily symptoms, for example. All right. Weight has also a big impact on hypertension and blood pressure. We all know hypertension is very common in PKD, can trigger disease progression, and therefore it's one of the cornerstones of PKD management. So we asked, have you been diagnosed with arterial hypertension or are you having high blood pressure? 84 participants reported to have high blood pressure or arterial hypertension. And so we also asked, have you seen changes in your blood pressure? And here again, most notably of those 84, 56 reported improvements in their blood pressure. Also here you can see that the ketogenic diet cohort reported more improvements than the cohort of time-restricted diet. 23% still saw no changes. Fortunately, we didn't have any reports of worsening, and 9% did not measure their blood pressure regularly. Of course, we asked then those 56 participants to reach if they can provide, self-provide some numbers from before starting their diet and after starting their diet. You can see the results here on the left side. You see in red the systolic blood pressure and in blue the diastolic blood pressure. And here you, by the way, 50 participants reached back to us with such values. Such numbers. And here you can see a significant reduction, about around 16 points in systolic blood pressure, while the diastolic blood pressure reduced significantly by around 7 points. On the right side, you see basically the same, just separated for those two cohorts. And here is a paired analysis. So that means both blood pressures before and after were connected from each participant. And what I also want to highlight again is that the ketogenic diet cohort saw a slightly bigger improvement in blood pressure than the time-restricted diet. So this data again suggests that ketogenic diets could be actually very beneficial for hypertension and blood pressure treatment in patients with PKD. And this could be, for example, a good supporting measure for the general blood pressure medication. Actually, 20 participants in the study also reported after starting their ketogenic diets that they were able to cut back their blood pressure medication because of that. Right, and then of course we were interested in parameters of kidney function. So we asked our our participants, have you experienced changes in kidney function after starting your diet? Here, 65 participants reached back to us with numbers. And here you can see the results of those 65. 41 reported an increase in kidney function, 8 reported no changes, and 16 reported a decline. And on the right side, again, you can see I plotted all those numbers in a paired analysis again, here in light green before starting the diet, and in purple after starting the diet. Again, by the way, that's a thing I want to notice. I did an analysis of a subgroup of all participants who actually could ensure to be in ketosis by providing us actual ketosis levels. And if you take a look here, now you can see that in mean average, the kidney function improved by around 3 points from 58 to 61. When you take a look at the documented ketosis cohort, the mean difference is a little bit higher, from 70 to 76. I want to highlight, you definitely can see in both cohorts some of those declines. For example, also here, some slighter declines, some bigger declines, but you also can see those several improvements in kidney function. However, what I really want to highlight here, that this data is in its interpretation definitely restricted and limited. Why is that so? We all know eGFR values and creatinine values can vary heavily in individuals from one measurement to another. And to have better data, more reliable data, we would need a real time course and not just like 2 numbers from before and after. Okay, so that's the reason why I think we definitely need to be critical and careful with that data. However, it still shows and indicates that ketogenic diets could be beneficial for the kidney function of PKD patients. But from this point on, we need randomized clinical control trials. And I think based on this data, they are very well warranted, but those need to elucidate in detail the impact on the kidney function. All right. Now the second section of my presentation here, beside effects, of course, side effects, safety concerns are of great importance. So we asked here, did you have any new health issues after starting your diet? 68% reported yes, 32% reported no. We also asked, did these new health issues go away over time? Again, 32% had no new health issues, 17% said all went away within a week, 20% said all went away within a month, 18% said most went away within a month, and still 13% said most remained while on the diet. So what I would conclude out of this data is that when you start a ketogenic diet, it is very likely that you face some new health issues, but it's also very likely that those gonna go away over time. And of course, we were also interested in the types of new health issues. So we let our participants specify those. In light green, again, those columns show new health issues up in start of the diet. And in purple, you see the reports of those new health issues that have resolved over time. And at first, what I want to mention, you see the reports of those health issues are equally distributed on many different, which shows to me actually that this is a very individual thing. However, what you also can see is that most of those new health issues here in the purple columns have the same height as those in green. So that means most of those new health issues have resolved over time. We also asked our participants, have you or your doctor noticed any changes that raised safety, that raised a safety concern? Fortunately, 81% reported no, but still 19% reported yes. Here you can see definitely more on the ketogenic diet cohort. And all those changes that raise safety concerns, you can see now in this little table on the right side. On top, with most responses, the increased cholesterol levels. All the others had just few reports or single reports. Most of them actually normalized over time. I want to highlight two. We had one report of new incidence of kidney stones here. That was an asymptomatic incidental finding, but the participant ensured that that was never found in his kidney before. So I think this definitely shows it is happening and we should be aware of it. And another thing is increasing creatinine. Two reports, actually both responses reported later on that those kidney function cut back over time to their usual levels from before diet. From this point on, I concentrated, of course, on the cholesterol levels and wanted to analyze that a little bit more. So therefore, I asked my participants if they can self-provide some cholesterol levels from before and after starting the diet. You see again in green before starting the diet and in purple after starting the diet. Between 20 and 40 participants reached out to me with such data. And what you can see is that the total cholesterol definitely seemed to increase after starting the diet. Same thing for LDL. Also increasing. However, a positive effect is the slight increase in HDL, which is beneficial, and this decrease in triglycerides. And at this point, I want to talk a little bit about the cholesterol. Why is this a safety concern most of the time? And this is based on the big nutritional trials out there actually showing that saturated fats lead to increased LDL levels. They also show that increased LDL levels are correlated with increased risk for cardiovascular risk. And based on this, I think we definitely need to take this serious, especially because it is known that ADPKD patients have a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. However, I want to mention that those major nutritional trials always did their experiments and their trials based on a carbohydrate-based diet. So it's not completely, or we are not completely sure if we can completely transfer all those results on ketogenic diets. And for this reason, we definitely would need randomized controlled trials that assess the risk for cardiovascular disease in ketogenic diets. However, there are also lots of results out there, especially in the recent years, that actually suggest that the beneficial effects of ketogenic diets could outweigh the risk that is coming with the LDL. So those beneficial effects are the great reduction in weight ketogenic diets can make, the reduction in body fat, the improvement here in HDL, and the decreases in triglycerides. And there are many comments out there who think that actually those beneficial effects have a bigger impact on the risk of cardiovascular disease as actually the correlation of LDL. But at the end, I think it's very important to say that the data situation there is controversial and we don't have a certain answer for that yet. I think it's important to make the decision on an individual basis. And for that, I think it's very important to do, if you want to start such a diet, do it with your doctor together, do it under supervision so that you are able actually to react to any changes quickly and accordingly. All right, and the last section of my presentation is about feasibility. We were, of course, interested, is this kind of diet actually feasible for PKD patients? This first slide is about the implementation. So we asked, how was the switch from normal nutrition to your diet for you? Again, very nice to see that over or 38% here and 39% reported not a problem at all or took some time, but manageable. Still, more than 20% reported difficult or very hard. Does it take more time for you to prepare dietary food than your regular food? Here you see around 50% actually said it takes about the same time. For me, that was a little bit surprising. I would have expected that the ketogenic diet cohort shift a little bit more to it takes more time, and time-restricted diet shifts a little bit more to takes less time here. But in general, I think this data suggests that ketogenic diets or the implementation of ketogenic diets can be very well manageable by patients with PKD. We also asked, do you feel that your diet is easy to do for people with ADPKD? Here again, over 70% strongly or somewhat agreed with the statement, while around 14% disagreed. Would you recommend your diet to a friend or family member with ADPKD? Here, strikingly, 73% strongly agreed with that statement, 14 somewhat agreed, just 3 disagreed here. Showing for me, suggesting that ketogenic diets can definitely be feasible for PKD patients. And last but not least, a slide about the adherence to the diets. So we asked, how would you rate the overall feasibility of your dietary approach in daily life? Here, strikingly, more than half reported no problem at all doing it every single day. 43% reported no real problem, but I skip it several times a month. And around 6% here still reported difficult or very difficult. However, I also want to show you this graph. Have you had any breaks in between your diet? 54% reported no, but still 40% reported yes due to practical difficulty. So I think this shows that you shouldn't underestimate the implementation and adherence to ketogenic diets, but it also suggests that PKD patients can manage to adhere and implement such ketogenic diets. However, I also want to mention that the cohort, our participants probably were very well experienced with ketogenic diets. I don't show you this figure right now, but we analyzed the diets they have done in the past, and most participants did actually 2 or more diets in the past, showing they're very well experienced with it. And this brings me actually to the next slide, to the limitations of the study. This is not a randomized controlled prospective clinical trial at all. Yeah, so the study cohort is unbalanced. What I mean with that is it is likely that more participants wanted to take part who saw beneficial effects than adverse effects. It is also most likely that our cohort doesn't represent the average PKD population, as I just mentioned with the dietary experience here. All our participants did highly variable dietary protocols. Not all could ensure their ketosis levels, for example. Participants executed the diet just for a median average time of 5 months. We cannot do any predictions in long term, of course. And most importantly, data was retrospectively collected, which comes along with certain biases, of course. And the data was self-reported by participants, so that we are actually relying on the truthfulness of the data by the participants. To sum this up here, so this study is just a supporting study which collected data that was already out there to get first insights about possible effects, safety, and feasibility of ketogenic diets in ADPKD. And to summarize now all those results, I think the study can show that ketogenic diets seem to improve health and overall well-being of PKD patients. Here, especially the great improvements of PKD-related symptoms might contribute to that. Furthermore, the great results in weight reduction and in blood pressure reduction could contribute to that. But you should also notice ketogenic diets are likely to come along with new side effects. Even it is also likely that they are going away over time. Finally, ketogenic diets seem to be feasible and tolerable. You shouldn't underestimate it. And from our side in the study, we didn't find really critical big safety concerns. But as I just mentioned, many answers, many questions aren't answered yet. So I would definitely say the key message is here: if you're thinking about starting such a thing, always consult your doctor. Always do it with your doctor together, and so that you can react quickly and accordingly. So the data analysis of the study is almost done. We're just waiting, as I said, on some more data of our home medical school, the University Hospital of Cologne. And then we hopefully can publish this very soon. I want to notice here that this whole study is part of a translational pipeline, a clinical translational pipeline about ketogenic diets in ADPKD. And my supervisor at home, Roman Ulrich Müller, and my PI in Santa Barbara, Thomas Weimbs, were awarded by a grant from the US PKD Foundation to support one of those trials here, the Keto ADPKD trial. And as a little advertisement here, I have another presentation coming up on 5th of December for the Los Angeles chapter of the US PKD Foundation. And there I will present the same, or my results again. But this time I will focus also on this whole pipeline here and present especially the design and the setting of those two following trials here. Right, and now finally, I want to thank, of course, the whole Weimbs laboratory. Those guys are doing a great job in experimental research on ADPKD. I want to thank all researchers who have participated in this in the study, especially my PI, Thomas Weimbs. But finally, and most importantly, I want to thank all the PKD patients who have taken part in the study and shared their experiences with us. And now, thank you for listening. And I hope, and I would be happy to answer some questions and discuss some stuff of the study. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Strubl, for a very informative and exciting presentation. There's a lot coming down the pipelines across many levels in the PKD community. And I know many people are following this study and the possibility of the beneficial effects very closely. So we had a number of questions that were sent